Jerusalem is witnessing strange events, long foretold in the Bible. Could what is happening now be a sign of an impending global shift? Let's explore the prophecies coming to life and what happens next might change how you view the future. Join us on this journey. Prophecy about Jerusalem and the unfolding events. Jerusalem. The Sacred Heart is trembling. There is a city whose name echoes both in the Bible and on the news. A place both holy and dangerous, both a center of hope and a spark for war. Jerusalem. Not only a religious symbol, but a prophetic gauge for the fate of the world. For thousands of years, this city has witnessed empires rise and fall, crusades unfold, destruction and rebuilding. But what is happening now in our time seems not just a repeat of history, but the step-by-step fulfillment of ancient prophecies written long ago. And if that is true, then we are not just witnesses of history. We are living in a pivotal chapter of God's final plan. What makes Jerusalem different is not just its importance to the three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but also that every upheaval here shakes the entire world. A single action, a parade, a political decision, a clash between worshippers, can send ripples from Washington to Tehran, from the Vatican to Beijing. It is a coincidence, or more precisely, it is exactly as foretold, that everything happening now feels predicted. The clashes around the Temple Mount, global efforts to divide the city, the growing fears of a religious war. The Bible once spoke of a time when all eyes would turn toward Jerusalem, and now that is unfolding, from world leaders to ordinary people watching the news every day. 3 prophecies, 3 alarming warnings. It is no coincidence that 3 major prophecies about Jerusalem are all being fulfilled at the same time. Each prophecy acts like a wave pushing humanity closer to the threshold of the end. 1. The return of the Jewish people to the Promised Land, a nation exiled for nearly 2,000 years, yet preserved its identity and re-established its state. 2. Jerusalem becoming the center of global unrest, as prophesied in Zechariah 12:12. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people. 3. All nations gathering against this city, as described in the prophetic books and Revelation, opening the door to the final battle between good and evil. More and more, what was once seen as metaphor in the Bible is now showing up on the front pages of international newspapers, not just faith, but a reality we must confront. To diplomats, Jerusalem might be a complex geopolitical puzzle, but to those who read and understand the Bible, it is the link between humanity's past, present, and future. A war not merely over territory, but a clash between light and darkness, between the sacred and the secular. So the question is no longer, are the prophecies true? But instead, what chapter are we in on that prophetic map? Is our era the time when all signs will be fulfilled, or merely the beginning of the storm? Every sign is now revealing itself, and the door of destiny seems to be opening. The restoration of Israel, a mark of a divine plan. A miracle in the modern age. If someone told you a miracle had occurred in the modern world, broadcast live, written across thousands of newspaper pages, and known by the international community, yet its divine nature went unnoticed, would you believe it? In 1948, the re-establishment of the State of Israel was not merely a political event after World War II. It was the starting point of a chain of awakened prophecies, a miraculous return after nearly 2 millennia of exile. The Jewish people, erased from the map in 70 AD, when the Second Temple was destroyed by the Romans, returned to their ancestral land, not only with new flags, but with the revival of the Hebrew language, a legal system, and an authentic Jewish culture. This event has no precedent in world history. Never before has a people dispersed for so long managed to preserve their identity and return to establish a nation. A prophecy thought long dead in ancient scripture suddenly came alive on the ground. Doubt from the believers themselves. Ironically, the atheists didn't care, but believers were skeptical, though the Bible, from Isaiah, Jeremiah, to Ezekiel, all foretold that God's people would be brought back to the promised land when it finally happened. Many believers still refused to acknowledge it as fulfillment. Perhaps because modern faith has become overly rational, accustomed to thinking of prophecy as moral symbolism rather than actual historical events. For centuries, churches developed spiritualized doctrines of Israel, viewing the church as spiritual Israel, thereby indirectly demeaning the literal return of the Jewish people. But in reality, Israel returned in flesh, in blood, in history, just as the Bible recorded. Painful memories and the journey home. Israel's nationhood didn't come from ease, but from immense suffering. After multiple exiles, from Babylon, Persia to the Ottoman Empire, and especially after the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were murdered, the world was finally forced to ask, where do the Jews truly belong? That very question paved the way for the historic declaration on May 14, 1948, when David Ben-Gurion read the Declaration of Independence, establishing the State of Israel. Just one day later, 5 surrounding Arab nations attacked. Israel, less than 24 hours old, was plunged into a war for survival, but they endured, and from the ashes, a nation was reborn, carrying both sorrow and promise, a promise that never expires. Long ago, God spoke to Abraham, "I will give to you and your descendants the land as an everlasting possession." Genesis 17:8. Though Israel was repeatedly disobedient, invaded, divided, and lost control of the land, the promise was never revoked. It only paused, waiting for the right time. Strangely, while the empires that once ruled the land, from Rome, Byzantium, Arab caliphates, Ottoman Empire to the British, have all faded or vanished, only Israel has returned. That endurance does not come from human strength, but from the faithfulness of the one who promised. A plan not just for Israel. Israel's reestablishment is not just the story of a nation, but a crucial link in a much larger divine plan. A plan leading to the end times, to the return of the Messiah. Every shift in Israel, from border conflicts, disputes over Jerusalem, to the Abraham Accords, cannot be separated from the prophetic context established thousands of years ago. If you look closely, you'll see history is not unfolding randomly. Every headline, every political decision surrounding Israel is connected to a sacred thread laid out by Scripture, and it is happening in our time. The resurrection of Israel. The miraculous return of a people thought to be lost. In 70 AD, under Roman General Titus, Jerusalem was razed, the Second Temple burned, and tens of thousands of Jews were killed, enslaved, or forced to flee. This event was not only a historical tragedy, but it also marked the disappearance of the State of Israel from the world map for nearly 2 millennia. With no land, no flag, no army, the Jews became the largest exiled people in human history, scattered from Europe to North Africa, from the Middle East to distant lands in Asia and the Americas. They were despised, expelled, forced to convert, even massacred, culminating in the Holocaust, where over 6 million Jews were murdered in Nazi concentration camps. To many, this nation was finished. But to God, the plan continued. An ancient promise echoing through time, Ezekiel 36:24, rings out as a vow never forgotten. "I will take you from among the nations, gather you out of all countries, and bring you into your own land." That prophecy was spoken in the 6th century BC during the Babylonian exile, when the Jewish people had no hope for the future. Yet astonishingly, more than 2,500 years later, those words came to life in the modern era. On May 14, 1948, after international pressure, especially from the United Nations, the State of Israel was proclaimed by David Ben-Gurion. This was not just the birth of a new country, but the resurrection of a promise long buried in history. In a world where everything is explained by logic, politics, and power, Israel's return was a sacred shock, breaking every prediction and marking an irreversible turn in the prophetic flow. A resurrection marked by fire and existential threat. But miracles always come with trials. Less than 24 hours after declaring independence, Israel was attacked by a coalition of 5 Arab nations: Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. A fledgling nation with no professional army and no modern weapons had to face seasoned and better equipped forces. It seemed Israel would collapse before it began, but instead of being wiped out, they held firm and won. That victory wasn't just a military feat, but a profound symbol. Prophecy cannot be extinguished, even if the world unites against it. A clash between divine promise and worldly forces. That joint attack was not just an ordinary war. It was material resistance to a divine intent. From a prophetic perspective, it was darkness resisting as light began to dawn. Is it possible that every time a prophecy is fulfilled, there is an equal pushback from worldly forces trying to stop it? Israel, from its very first day, has been a living symbol of this truth. A victory beyond politics, prophecy prevailing. Today, Israel not only exists, it has become one of the world's most advanced nations in technology, defense, agriculture, and science. What's astonishing is, within just decades, from a poor and besieged state, Israel has risen powerfully, something many resource-rich nations haven't achieved. This is not merely the result of human intellect, but the visible presence of a divine plan in motion. Israel is not just a country, it is a living testimony to God's enduring promise, defying time, war, and the human heart. The divine restoration of Israel and current events. Jerusalem, where heaven brushes the earth and faith clashes with fire. At just over 125 square kilometers, Jerusalem is tiny compared to most modern capitals, yet its spiritual weight is beyond measure. This city, layered in time and prophecy, is sacred ground for the world's 3 most influential faiths. For Jews, it holds the Western Wall, the last standing vestige of the Second Temple. For Christians, it is the land where Jesus was crucified, buried, and rose again. And for Muslims, it is home to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, 2 of Islam's most revered sites. Jerusalem is more than a city. It's a spiritual epicenter where millennia of belief, longing, and divine promise converge. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, despite their differences, are all anchored to this one place through unbreakable theological bonds. That makes every stone, every step, more than just history. It's sacred territory, rich with meaning, identity, and eternal consequence. But why does Jerusalem remain a flashpoint for conflict in the modern age? The answer may lie in something deeper than politics or geography. Jerusalem doesn't belong to one nation, one ethnicity, or one worldview. It belongs to something transcendent, a divine covenant, a prophetic destiny. Any attempt to divide, govern, or resolve its fate often ends up stirring a spiritual storm in the hearts of billions who see this city as holy beyond negotiation. Here, geopolitical decisions take on sacred weight. Proposals to partition Jerusalem, half to Israelis, half to Palestinians, or to internationalize it under global oversight, may appear logical in the diplomatic arena. Yet to believers, such ideas often strike at the heart of what they consider sacred and non-negotiable. Jerusalem is not just a prize of earthly power, it's a symbol of heavenly order, meant to fulfill something far greater than human politics can comprehend. Jerusalem isn't just geography, it's destiny. And because of that, the struggle over the city goes far beyond borders. It is, at its core, a battle of worldviews, a clash between divine narrative and human ambition. That is why, for better or worse, Jerusalem continues to sit at the center of global tension, caught between the temporal and the eternal. The prophecy of Zechariah, Jerusalem, as the epicenter of global chaos, the Bible in Zechariah 12:2 offers a strange yet timely warning. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the surrounding peoples. The image of a cup of trembling speaks not only of instability, but of a bitter cup that nations cannot swallow, cannot ignore. Jerusalem, in prophetic terms, is not just a city, it is a spiritual flashpoint, watched by both heaven and hell. And just as foretold for decades, the tensions in Jerusalem have caused global shockwaves. From the Intifadas, Gaza wars, Temple Mount riots, to heated United Nations resolutions. Even a single political declaration about Jerusalem, like recognizing it as Israel's capital, can trigger mass protests and plunge the Middle East into chaos. Jerusalem, clearly, is no longer a local issue. It has become a global constant, where world powers, international organizations, and major religions all converge, as if destiny compels them to be involved. Peace, an illusion, amid prophetic context. There has been no shortage of diplomatic efforts to achieve peace in Jerusalem, from the Oslo Accords, the Madrid Conference, to the two-state initiative, but all have collapsed. Why? Could it be because they are trying to solve a theological issue using political tools? Peace, from the biblical perspective, does not come through compromise, but only when God completes His plan. Jerusalem, according to prophecy, will not be divided, but will be restored fully under the rule of the Messiah. Every attempt to split, partition, or internationalize this city goes against the sacred prophetic axis, and therefore, sooner or later, will fail. The very proposals by nations to divide the city, half to the Jews, half to the Palestinians, could be the final straw. This not only threatens regional peace, but may trigger the prophetic sequences recorded in Revelation, Daniel, and Zechariah about a final battle centered around Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the lifeline between heaven and earth. Ultimately, Jerusalem is not just a place of limestone hills, ancient walls, and sacred temples. This city is the epicenter of a global spiritual war between light and darkness, between promise and resistance, between the Creator and the powers of this world. When you look at Jerusalem today, the moments of unrest, the clashes, the declarations, remember that each shift here is not just political, but a step closer to prophecy. Each conflict is not just between people, but a confrontation between worldly power and divine authority. Time is passing, and we are living in prophecy. As historical events unfold, do you realize we are living within a prophecy? And when time runs out, will you be ready to stand firm as everything begins to collapse? Each individual's action in the global plan. Ultimately, the question is, where do you stand in God's global story? Be sure to subscribe to follow our next videos.